Teresa Allen's bare feet slapped against the mud-slicked stones of Iron Paw Village, each step sending jolts of pain through her weakened body. Midnight had fallen like a shroud over the northern highlands, and the moon hung in the sky like a wound, blood-red and swollen, casting everything in crimson light. Her lungs burned, her heart hammered against her ribs with a violence that had nothing to do with running and everything to do with the terror clawing its way up her throat. Something was wrong, catastrophically wrong. She clutched at her chest as she ran, feeling it, that crushing pressure, that ancient instinct screaming in her bones. The same instinct that had failed her 19 years ago when she'd been born without the ability to fully shift. The same instinct the pack had mocked her for claiming to possess. But tonight, it wasn't a whisper. It was a roar, and it was screaming one word over and over: run. But Teresa wasn't running away from danger. She was running straight, toward it, trying to warn the very people who'd spent her entire life making sure she knew exactly how worthless she was. The great hall rose before her, its doors thrown wide, golden torchlights spilling into the night. Inside, she could hear them, the warriors of Ironpaw, drinking and celebrating another successful hunt. Their laughter echoed through the streets, loud and careless, the sound of wolves who believed themselves invincible. Teresa's stomach twisted. They had no idea what was coming. She burst through the entrance, her torn dress, barely more than rags, clinging to her lean frame. Mud splattered her legs. Blood from earlier beatings had dried in dark streaks across her arms. "They're coming!" Her voice cracked, raw with desperation. "The Bloodfang pack, they're coming now!" The hall fell silent. 50 warriors turned to stare at her. Some were in human form, others half-shifted with claws extended and eyes gleaming amber. All of them wore the same expression, contempt, mixed with irritation that she dared interrupt their revelry. War Chief Dragon Stormfang sat at the high table, a massive figure even in human form, his dark hair pulled back, his scarred jaw tight. For just a heartbeat their eyes met. Teresa saw something flicker there, concern maybe, or recognition, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He looked away, his hand tightening around his drinking horn. Alpha Roderick Ironclaw rose from his seat at the head of the table. He was 47 years old, a mountain of muscle and authority, his gray-streaked beard braided with silver rings of rank. When he moved, the room held its breath. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and seized Teresa by the throat, lifting her until her toes barely touched the ground. "You dare," he growled, his breath reeking of mead and rage, "interrupt us with your Omega paranoia?" Teresa's vision spotted. She clawed at his hand, gasping. "Please, I felt it there." "You felt it?" Roderick's laugh was cruel. He threw her to the ground with such force that her head cracked against the stone floor. Stars exploded behind her eyes. "You can't even shift properly, and you think you have instincts? You think you're worthy of a wolf's senses?" Teresa pushed herself to her hands and knees, tasting copper. "I'm telling the truth. Check the eastern perimeter. Please, just check." "Enough." Roderick's boot caught her in the ribs. The snap of bone was audible over the crowd's laughter. "Remove this creature from my sight." 2 warriors grabbed Teresa's arms, Garrett and Simmons, men who'd tormented her since childhood. They dragged her from the hall while she screamed, begging them to listen, to at least send scouts to do something. Outside, away from the Alpha's eyes, they took their time. Garrett's fist caught her jaw. Simmons kicked her stomach. They dropped her in the mud behind the grain stores, her body a collection of new agonies layered over old scars. "Should've kept your mouth shut, Omega," Garrett spat. "You bring nothing but trouble." They left her there, broken and bleeding, their laughter fading as they returned to the warmth of the hall. Teresa lay in the mud, trying to breathe through the fire in her chest. At least 2 ribs were cracked, maybe more. Her jaw throbbed. Blood filled her mouth. Above her, that red moon glared down, indifferent to her suffering. The pressure in her chest hadn't lessened. If anything, it had grown worse, a crushing weight that made her want to claw at her own skin. She'd tried to warn them. She'd done everything she could, and they'd beaten her for it. Let them die, then, a dark voice whispered in her mind. They deserve whatever's coming. But even as the thought formed, she knew she couldn't mean it, couldn't truly wish death on them despite everything. There were children in the village, elders, people who'd never raised a hand against her, who'd simply looked away when others did. Teresa dragged herself into the shadow of the grain store, trying to find a position that didn't feel like knives in her chest. She was so tired of the pain, tired of being invisible except when they needed someone to torment, tired of... The howl cut through the night like a blade. Teresa's blood turned to ice. She knew that sound, the war cry of the Bloodfang pack, Iron Paw's oldest enemies. And it was close, too close. Right outside, the eastern gate exploded inward with a deafening crack of splintering wood and twisted metal. Wolves poured through the breach, massive, battle-scarred, their eyes glowing with bloodlust. The Bloodfang pack had come, and they'd come for slaughter. Chaos erupted across Iron Paw Village like wildfire. Warriors burst from the Great Hall, some shifting mid-run into their wolf forms, others fighting in their human shapes with claws extended and fangs bared. The clash of bodies, the screams of the dying, the howls of rage and pain, all of it blended into a symphony of carnage that made Teresa's ears ring. She pressed herself against the grain store wall, too broken to fight, too weak to run. All she could do was watch. Fire bloomed across the village as torches were knocked over, catching thatch roofs and wooden structures. The smoke burned her lungs, mixed with the copper tang of blood that now soaked the earth. She saw Garrett, the warrior who'd beaten her minutes ago, go down beneath 3 Bloodfang wolves, his screams cut short with horrifying finality. She saw young Petra, barely 19, running for the temple with her dress on fire. She saw Alpha Roderick in his massive gray wolf form, fighting with the ferocity of a king defending his realm, blood spraying from wounds that would have killed a lesser wolf. And she saw Dragon Stormfang, the war chief who'd once shown her kindness before ambition stole his courage. He fought like a legend, his russet wolf form larger than most, his movements precise and deadly. He was trying to rally the warriors to create a defensive line, but there were too many enemies, and the Bloodfang pack had caught them unprepared, drunk, scattered. Teresa's gaze caught on something strange. While everyone else fought or fled, Elder Moira, the pack's spiritual leader, a woman of 60 winters with iron-gray hair and cold eyes, was slipping away from the battle. She moved with purpose toward the sacred temple, her face not frightened, but calculating. Their eyes met for just a moment across the burning village, and Moira's lips curved into the smallest smile before she disappeared into the shadows. Suspicion bloomed in Teresa's chest, but there was no time to pursue it. A Bloodfang warrior spotted her, his yellow eyes locking onto her cowering form. He charged, teeth bared. Teresa tried to move, but her broken body wouldn't cooperate. This was it. This was how she'd die. The warrior's jaws never reached her. Dragon's russet form slammed into him mid-leap, the 2 wolves tumbling in a snarling mass of fur and fury. Dragon's teeth found the enemy's throat, and it was over in seconds. The war chief didn't even look at Teresa. He just charged back into the fray, leaving her with the corpse of the wolf who'd almost ended her. The raid lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes that felt like hours. When the Bloodfang pack finally retreated, melting back into the forest with their message of dominance delivered, they left behind a graveyard. Bodies lay scattered across the village square like discarded toys. The eastern gate was nothing but splinters. Half the buildings burned. The screaming had stopped, replaced by the moaning of the wounded and dying. Teresa remained in her hiding spot, trembling. She'd survived. Again. Always surviving. Never quite allowed to live or die. Dawn broke over Ironpaw Village, cold and gray, its light revealing the full scope of the massacre. 200 wolves were dead. Warriors, elders, children. The survivors, barely 40 strong, gathered in the ruined square. Their faces were hollow with shock and grief, their bodies covered in blood and ash. Alpha Roderick stood at the center, his human form now, his chest wrapped in bandages that were already soaking through. His voice, when he spoke, was hoarse with rage and pain. How? The single word cut through the morning air. How did they breach our defenses? How did they know exactly where to strike? The survivors looked at each other, confusion and fear swirling among them. The eastern gate had been their weakest point, yes, but it should have been guarded, should have had scouts, should have had warning. Elder Moira stepped forward, her robes somehow pristine despite the carnage, her face arranged in an expression of deep sorrow. She raised one trembling hand and pointed directly at Teresa, still slumped against the grain store wall. It was her. Every eye turned toward Teresa. The weight of their collective gaze was crushing. Teresa Allen was assigned to watch the eastern approach last night, Moira said, her voice heavy with accusation. She fell asleep at her post. She failed to raise the alarm. And when the attack came, she hid while warriors died. No. Teresa's voice came out as a broken whisper. She tried to stand, but her body betrayed her, and she collapsed back against the wall. No, I tried to warn you. I ran to the hall. I told you they were coming. Lies, Roderick roared, advancing on her. I was in the hall all evening. You never came. You never warned us. I did. Teresa's protest died as she looked at the faces surrounding her. The warriors who'd been drunk in the hall, who'd laughed as Roderick threw her down, who'd watched Garrett and Simmons drag her out. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them confirmed her story. They'd been too drunk to remember, or they simply didn't care. She's always been a curse, Victor Blackmane snarled, his face twisted with grief and rage. Born wrong, weak, broken, and now she's gotten. Our family's killed. My son died because of her, an older woman sobbed. My boy... The accusations built like a wave, each voice adding to the crescendo. Teresa tried to defend herself, tried to explain that she'd warned them, that she'd begged them to check the perimeter, but her voice was lost in the roar of their grief-turned rage. Dragan stood at the edge of the crowd, his face unreadable. For one desperate moment, Teresa locked eyes with him. Tell them, she wanted to scream. You were there. You saw me. You heard me. Tell them the truth. Dragan's jaw worked, muscles tensing in his scarred face. He took a step forward and Teresa's heart leaped with hope. Then he bent down and picked up a smooth black stone from the ruins, the exile token, used only for the pack's most heinous criminals. She brought this on us, he said, his voice carrying across the square with the authority of war chief. Her weakness has always been a curse on this pack. He met Teresa's eyes, and she saw something break behind his gaze. Guilt, regret, the death of whatever honor he'd once possessed. But he didn't stop. He threw the stone. It landed at Teresa's feet with a finality that echoed like a death knell. Send her to the wastes. The pronouncement hung in the air. The forbidden wastes, where exiles were sent to die slowly, where legend said ancient spirits haunted the barren ground, where nothing grew and no one survived. It was a death sentence, just slower than execution. No, please, Teresa begged, finally finding her voice. I'm innocent. I tried to help. Please. But no one was listening. Rough hands grabbed her arms, Victor and Simmons, eager for vengeance. They dragged her through the ruins, her bare feet leaving a trail of blood on the scorched earth. The pack followed, a grim procession to witness the exile of the one they decided deserved their blame. The wastes began at the edge of Ironpaw territory, where the fertile ground gave way to jagged rocks and, dead trees that reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers, grasping at hope that would never come. The air itself felt different here, thinner, colder, thick with an ancient presence that made the hair rise on the back of Teresa's neck. They threw her past the boundary marker, a standing stone carved with warnings in the old tongue. Teresa hit the ground hard, her broken ribs screaming in protest. She tried to crawl back, to beg one more time for mercy, for justice, for someone to believe her. Alpha Roderick's voice stopped her. Teresa Allen, for your crimes against the Iron Paw Pack, you are hereby exiled to the Forbidden Wastes. May the spirits judge you as you deserve. She looked up at the faces of her pack, the people she'd lived among her entire life. She saw hatred, grief, relief that they had someone to blame. And she saw Dragon, standing apart from the others, his face a mask of stone, but his hands clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Dragon," she whispered. But if he heard her, he gave no sign. The survivors turned their backs on her as one, walking away from the wastes, from her, from the truth. Teresa watched them go, her vision blurring with tears and smoke and pain. She was alone, broken, dying, exactly what they'd always believed she was, worthless. But as the last of the pack disappeared from view and Teresa turned to face the desolation of the Forbidden Wastes stretching endlessly before her, something stirred deep in her chest. Not the crushing pressure from before, but something else, something that felt almost like rage. They expected her to die out here, expected her to disappear quietly, to become just another cautionary tale about weakness and failure. They had no idea that some things, when broken badly enough, don't just fall apart. They transform. The Forbidden Wastes stretched before Teresa, like the corpse of the world itself. She took one step forward, then another, her bare feet finding purchase on rock that felt wrong, too smooth in places, too sharp in others, as if the land couldn't decide whether to be merciful or cruel. The boundary stone stood behind her now, its ancient warnings carved in a language she'd never learned, but somehow understood on an instinctual level. Here lies death, here lies judgment, here lies truth. Her broken ribs ground against each other with every breath. Blood had soaked through her tattered dress, warm at first, now cooling in the morning air. She knew the signs of internal bleeding, had seen enough wounded warriors to recognize death's slow approach. Hours, maybe. A day if she was unlucky. The landscape was a nightmare rendered in gray and black. Dead trees clawed at the sky, their bark stripped away to reveal bone-white wood underneath. No birds sang here, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed reluctant to touch this place, stirring only occasionally to carry whispers that might have been voices or might have been madness. Teresa's legs gave out. After 50 yards, she hit the ground hard, pain exploding through her chest. A scream tore from her throat, but there was no one to hear it. She lay there for what might have been minutes or hours, staring up at the morning sky that was already fading from gray to the peculiar colorless quality that hung over the wastes. Even the sun seemed dimmer here, as if its light was being slowly drained away. "Get up," she told herself. "You have to keep moving." But why? Moving toward what? There was nothing out here but more desolation, more death. Maybe it was better to just lie here and let it end. At least then the pain would stop. At least then she wouldn't have to carry the weight of being worthless anymore. Her eyes drifted closed, and the memories came flooding back. Teresa was 7 years old, standing in the training grounds with 12 other children her age. It was the day of first shift, when young wolves were supposed to discover their true forms for the first time. The air buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Parents lined the edges of the grounds, watching with pride. "Remember," Elder Thane instructed, his voice kind but firm, "don't force it. Feel your wolf inside you. Invite it forward. Let it emerge." One by one, the children began to change. Little Petra was first, her body rippling as golden fur sprouted across her skin. She became a small but perfect wolf cub, yipping with delight. The others followed. Thomas, Victor, Sarah, all of them transforming with the ease of breathing. Teresa closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for the wolf she'd been told lived inside every member of the pack. She felt something, a presence, vast and strange, pressing against the inside of her skin like it was trying to get out but couldn't find the door. "Come on," she whispered. "Please, please work." The other children were playing now, tumbling over each other in their wolf forms while their parents cheered. Teresa strained harder, sweat beading on her forehead. The pressure inside her chest built until it felt like her ribs would crack. Her eyes shifted. She could feel it, the world sharpening into focus, colors bleeding away until everything was cast in shades of gray and silver. Her fingernails lengthened into claws. Then agony ripped through her body. Teresa collapsed, coughing. Red droplets splattered the dirt in front of her. Blood. She was coughing blood. "Teresa!" Elder Thane was beside her in an instant, his hands checking her pulse, her breathing. "Someone get old Brenna!" The other children stopped playing, staring at her with wide eyes. Their parents pulled them back, as if whatever was wrong with Teresa might be contagious. She heard the whispers starting. "What's wrong with her? Is she broken? Maybe she's not really one of us." Old Brenna arrived, her weathered face creased with concern. She had been the pack's healer for longer than most wolves had been alive. She helped Teresa to her feet and guided her away from the training grounds, away from the staring eyes and whispered judgments. In Brenna's dwelling, surrounded by dried herbs and the smell of healing tinctures, the old woman examined Teresa with gentle but thorough hands. When she pulled aside Teresa's shift to check her spine, Brenna's breath caught. "This mark," she whispered, tracing the birthmark on Teresa's shoulder blade. It was shaped like a constellation, 7 stars arranged in a pattern that Teresa had always thought looked like a wolf howling at a crescent moon. "This mark, it can't be... What is it?" Teresa asked, her voice small and frightened. "Is it bad?" Brenna's face had gone pale as moonlight. Her hands trembled as she pulled Teresa's shift back into place. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared at the wall with eyes that seemed to be looking at something very far away, or very long ago. "Brenna?" The old woman shook herself, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing, child, just an unusual marking." She moved to her shelves, pulling down various jars and pouches. "Your body is having difficulty with the shift. Some wolves are late bloomers. We'll help it along." She mixed bitter herbs into a tea, wolfsbane, nightshade, other things Teresa couldn't identify. The smell alone made her stomach turn. "Drink this every full moon," Brenna instructed, pressing the cup into Teresa's hands. "It will help with the pain, help your body adjust." Teresa drank. It tasted like death and earth and something metallic that coated her throat. "Will I ever be normal? Will I be able to shift like the others?" Brenna's smile was sad. "Perhaps when you're older." It was a lie. Teresa wouldn't understand that for another 10 years. Teresa's eyes snapped open. She was still in the wastes, still dying, but the memory had bought her a moment of strength. She dragged herself forward, her fingers finding purchase on sharp rocks that cut into her palms. Blood smeared behind her, marking her path like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale where the lost child never finds their way home. A massive stone loomed ahead, taller than the others. Ancient markings covered its surface, symbols she didn't recognize but that made something in her chest resonate like a struck bell. She crawled toward it, drawn by instinct she didn't understand. 50 feet, 30, 10. She collapsed against the stone's base, her back pressing against carvings that were warm despite the cold air. Her blood touched the markings, and something flickered. A faint glow, there and gone so quickly she thought she'd imagined it. The memories pulled her down again. 14 years old, the worst age to be different. Old enough to understand cruelty, young enough to believe you deserve it. Teresa was behind the grain stores, trapped by 4 teenagers, Victor, Thomas, Garrett, and Simmons. They'd been drinking stolen mead and decided entertainment meant making the weak girl bleed. "Come on, Omega," Victor taunted, shoving her. "Fight back, or are you too broken even for that?" She tried to run. Thomas blocked her. She tried to shift. Even a partial shift would have given her claws to defend herself. But as always, her body betrayed her. Only her eyes changed, useless without the strength to back them up. Garrett's fist caught her stomach. She doubled over, gagging. Simmons grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "My father says you're cursed, says you should have been cast out years ago." "Maybe we should do it ourselves," Victor suggested, producing a knife. "Carve the pack mark off her. Make it official." Teresa's heart hammered in her throat. They meant it. She could see it in their eyes, smell the mead courage that made them stupid and dangerous. "What's going on here?" The voice cut through the moment like a blade. The 4 teenagers spun around to find Dragon Stormfang standing 10 feet away, his arms crossed, his face thunderous. He was 19 years old then, newly appointed to the Warriors Circle, and already building a reputation as someone you didn't want to cross. He stood 6 feet tall in human form, his dark hair short, his jaw already showing the scars that would define him. His eyes were amber even in human form, the mark of someone whose wolf was always close to the surface. "Pick on someone your own size," Dragon said quietly. Quiet was more dangerous than shouting. Victor was stupid but not suicidal. "We were just leaving. You were just leaving." Dragon took a step forward, and something in his posture made all 4 teenagers back away. "And if I hear you've touched her again, you'll answer to me. Understood?" They fled. Teresa remained where she was, slumped against the grain store wall, trying not to cry in front of him. Crying only made things worse, made you look weaker than you already were. Dragon approached and offered his hand. She stared at it like it might be a trap. Kindness often was. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." She took his hand. His grip was warm and strong as he pulled her to her feet. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of something that had no name yet. "Don't let them see you cry," Dragon said, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard from any warrior. "Show them you're stronger than they think." "But I'm not strong," Teresa whispered. "I can't even shift. I'm exactly what they say I am, broken." "Strength isn't just in the shift." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "My grandmother used to say the first guardians—" He stopped himself abruptly, his jaw tightening. For a moment he looked almost frightened, as if he'd said something he shouldn't have. "The first guardians?" Teresa asked. "What are those?" "Old stories," Dragon said quickly. "Legends. Nothing important. Forget I mentioned them." He started to walk away, then paused and turned back. His amber eyes held hers for a long moment, searching for something. "Be careful, Teresa," he said quietly. "There are things about you that... just be careful." He left her there, confused and somehow more frightened than before. But from that day forward, she noticed small kindnesses that could only have come from him. Food left outside her dwelling, warnings whispered when trouble was brewing, a shield that worked from a distance, always careful never to acknowledge her in public, never to risk his rising reputation by association with the pack's failure. She'd been so grateful for the scraps of protection. She never questioned why he only helped when no one was watching. In the present, Teresa's vision blurred. The pain in her chest had become a constant companion, almost comforting in its familiarity. She'd been hurting for so long that the absence of pain would have felt stranger. More memories surfaced, dragging her deeper. 17 years old. The full moon hung heavy and bloated in the sky, and Teresa's body was trying to kill her. She convulsed on the floor of her small dwelling, her skin glowing faintly from beneath, silver gold light pulsing in time with her racing heart. Every bone felt like it was trying to break free of her flesh. Every muscle seized and released in rhythms that match no natural process. This happened every full moon now, getting worse each cycle. She'd stopped going to the communal gatherings on moon nights, claiming illness. No one questioned it. No one cared enough to question it. Her door burst open. Old Brenna rushed in, a cup already in her hands, the bitter herbs Teresa had been drinking since she was 7, mixed with something new, something that smelled of death. "Drink," Brenna commanded, forcing the cup to Teresa's lips. "Now, child, quickly!" Teresa drank, choking on the foul mixture. Within seconds, the light beneath her skin began to dim. The pain receded from unbearable to merely agonizing. Her body stopped trying to tear itself apart. She lay gasping on the floor while Brenna checked her pulse, her breathing, her eyes. "What's happening to me?" Teresa whispered. "This is getting worse. Every moon, it's worse. Am I dying?" Brenna's face was drawn, exhausted. "Your body is rejecting the shift, fighting against it. You must take the herbs, child. Without them—" She didn't finish the sentence. That night, unable to sleep through the lingering pain, Teresa heard voices outside her dwelling. She recognized them, Brenna and Elder Moira, speaking in hushed tones they thought were private. "How much longer can you suppress it?" That was Moira's voice, sharp with demand. "I don't know." Brenna sounded old, defeated. "The power grows stronger each moon. The herbs barely contain it anymore. If she ever transforms, she won't." Moira's voice carried absolute certainty. "We'll make sure of that. The guardian bloodline must stay buried. The power must never awaken. But the mark means nothing if the power never manifests. Keep her weak. Keep her broken. The last thing this pack needs is another guardian rising to question our rule." Their voices faded as they walked away. Teresa lay in the darkness, trying to make sense of what she'd heard. Guardian bloodline. The power. What power? She couldn't even shift properly. How could she possibly be a threat to anyone? She didn't understand. Not then. 3 months later, old Brenna died in her sleep. "Natural causes," Elder Moira said. "A long life well lived." But Teresa noticed how Moira watched the burial with satisfaction, not grief. Noticed how she immediately took control of all Brenna's records, all her herb stores, all her secrets. Teresa taught herself the herb mixture after that, breaking into the locked stores late at night, memorizing the proportions by smell and taste. She had to. Without the suppressants, the full moons became unbearable. She never questioned why she needed them, never questioned what they were actually suppressing. The memory released her. Teresa's fingers dug into the earth beneath her, finding stone instead of soil. Her blood had pooled around her, more than seemed possible for one body to hold. The ancient markings on the stone were definitely glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with her fading heartbeat. One more memory surfaced, recent, raw. 2 days ago, the forest was cool and quiet, dappled sunlight filtering through autumn leaves. Teresa was foraging for the herbs she needed: wolfsbane, nightshade, silver root. The full moon was tomorrow night, and she needed to prepare. Voices ahead made her freeze. She recognized one of them, Elder Moira, but the others were unfamiliar, foreign. Teresa crept closer, staying downwind, moving with the silence of someone who'd spent a lifetime being invisible. She peered through the undergrowth and felt her blood turn to ice. Elder Moira stood in a clearing with 3 wolves Teresa had never seen before. They wore the marks of the Bloodfang pack, scars across their muzzles, brands on, their shoulders showing a fang-dripping blood. Enemy wolves in Iron Paw territory. "The celebration will have them distracted," Moira was saying. "The eastern gate will be unguarded from midnight to dawn. Alpha Roderick refuses to believe the Bloodfang pack would dare attack during a coronation celebration. His arrogance makes this easy. A Bloodfang warrior, massive and scarred, grinned. And your reward? Power in the new order, guaranteed lands, and the Omega Girl delivered to me alive. Teresa's heart stopped. The Omega? The warrior sounded skeptical. Why would you want a broken wolf? That's not your concern. Just make sure she survives the raid. I have plans for her. Teresa backed away slowly, carefully. A twig snapped under her foot. Moira's head whipped around, her eyes finding Teresa through the brush. For a moment they stared at each other. Then Teresa ran. She'd never been fast. Her weak body betrayed her as always. Moira caught up within seconds, her hand closing around Teresa's throat, slamming her against a tree. "You heard nothing," Moira hissed. "You're so weak, no one would believe you anyway." Teresa clawed at her hand. "Why? Why would you betray the pack?" "The pack is weak under Roderick, soft. With Bloodfang's support, I'll rebuild it stronger. And you, little Omega, are the key to everything. You're part of my plan. You always have been." "I don't understand," Moira smiled, cold and cruel. "No, you don't. That's what makes this perfect. Go ahead, Teresa. Run to the Alpha. Tell him what you heard. He'll laugh in your face just like he always does. And when the raid comes, when wolves die, I'll make sure everyone knows you could have stopped it." She released Teresa, letting her drop to the ground. "Go on, warn them. Let's see if anyone listens to the broken Omega." Teresa ran straight to the Great Hall, tried to warn them, and Moira had been right. No one believed her. Teresa's consciousness dragged itself back to the present. The sun had moved. Hours had passed while she lay dying, trapped in memories. The stone beneath her was warm now, almost hot, the markings blazing with silver-gold light that illuminated the growing darkness. She looked down at her blood soaking into the ancient carvings. The symbols rearranged themselves before her eyes, forming words in a language she shouldn't be able to read but somehow could. "When blood of the first touches sacred ground, the guardian shall rise." "Guardian," Teresa whispered. Dragon had mentioned them once. Moira had spoken of the guardian bloodline. Brenna had been suppressing something with those herbs for 12 years. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. She wasn't broken. She'd never been broken. They had broken her, on purpose. The suppressants, the herbs, the illnesses, every full moon, all of it designed to keep something buried, something powerful, something they feared. The anger that had been simmering in her chest since the exile began to build. It rose like a tide, hot and vast and righteous. They hadn't just rejected her. They'd spent her entire life poisoning her, suppressing what she was meant to be, turning her into something weak and helpless. And when she'd tried to save them, when she'd warned them, begged them, risked herself to protect the very people who'd spent 19 years tormenting her, they'd thrown her away like garbage. Elder Moira had orchestrated the entire massacre just to trigger something inside Teresa. The exile was meant to isolate her, to make it easier for Moira to claim whatever power lurked in Teresa's blood. 200 wolves had died as part of a plan to capture her. Dragon had known. His grandmother had told him years ago. He'd protected her as a child, then abandoned her as a man, chose his ambition over her life, threw the exile stone at her feet and let her die. The pack had blamed her for their own doom, made her a monster so they didn't have to face the truth, that their real enemy wore elders' robes and smiled while sending children to slaughter. Teresa's hands curled into fists, her fingernails cutting into her palms. Her blood fell onto the stone, and the glow intensified, spreading outward in lines that connected all the ancient markings into a vast pattern that she suddenly recognized. It was a map of constellations, the same constellations that marked her shoulder blade, the birthmark Brenna had seen and feared. "They wanted me to disappear," Teresa whispered to the uncaring wastes. to die quietly, to be forgotten. Her voice grew stronger, rage fueling her failing body. They poisoned me, broke me, turned me into something weak so they could feel strong. The stone beneath her hands began to tremble. They blamed me for their own sins, made me carry the weight of their failures. The ground cracked, lines spreading outward from the stone in a perfect circle. But Teresa Allen has one thing left to give. The pressure in her chest. The same pressure she'd felt her entire life, the thing she'd been told was weakness, exploded outward. Not destruction, transformation. Her mouth opened, and what emerged wasn't a scream. It was the beginning of a howl that would shake the foundations of the world. My rage. The silver gold light erupted from the stone, from her blood, from the birthmark on her shoulder blade. It consumed her vision, her body, her dying breath. And when that rage finally finds its voice, Teresa whispered as the light became blinding, as ancient power recognized its heir, the world will remember my name. The waste screamed in response, not in pain but in welcome. The guardian had come home. The light consumed everything. Teresa couldn't see, couldn't think, could barely remember who she was beneath the crushing weight of power that had been building inside her for 19 years. The ancient stone at her back burned hot as a forge, the carvings searing into her flesh like brands. She should have screamed, should have tried to pull away, but she couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but feel as something vast and terrible and beautiful tore through the prison of suppressants and lies that had kept it buried. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each one agony as her cracked ribs ground against organs that were already failing. Blood pooled beneath her, so much blood that the earth couldn't absorb it fast enough. It spread across the ancient markings, filling every carved line, every symbol, turning the stone into a map of constellations written in her own life. I'm dying, she thought distantly. This is what dying feels like. But beneath the pain, beneath the exhaustion, beneath everything she'd ever known about herself, something stirred, something that had been waiting her entire life for this exact moment. 19 years of being told she was broken, worthless, cursed. 19 years of beatings and starvation and herbs that tasted like death. 19 years of being invisible, except when they needed someone to hurt. 19 years of surviving when dying would have been easier. And for what? So she could crawl into the wastes and bleed out alone while they celebrated being rid of their shame? No, Teresa whispered. The word came out broken, barely audible, but it carried more weight than any sound she'd ever made. The anger that had been simmering crystallized into a single blazing truth. I deserved better. She deserved to have been born into a pack that valued her. She deserved to have grown up without poison masquerading as medicine. She deserved to have someone, anyone, believe her when she tried to save them. She deserved a life that wasn't measured in suffering, and they had stolen it from her. Teresa's body began to shake, not from cold or pain or fear, but from something erupting from a place so deep inside her that she'd never known it existed. The suppressant herb's effects, 12 years of bitter tea drunk, every full moon, were finally, completely wearing off. Without old Brenna to dose her, without Moira's control, the power that had been compressed and contained and forced into silence was breaking free, energy built in her chest, ancient and vast, pressing against her ribs like it was trying to escape through her bones. She'd felt this before, every full moon when she'd convulsed and glowed and nearly died. But this was different. This wasn't her body trying to shift. This was something infinitely larger trying to be born. She tried to contain it. Years of conditioning made her try to push it down, to make herself small and quiet and manageable. But she was too weak now, too broken, too close to death to hold anything back anymore. Her mouth opened, and the sound that emerged shattered the silence of the wastes like a hammer through glass. It started low, almost human, a moan of pain that held 19 years of suffering. Then it built, climbing higher, becoming something that no human throat should have been able to produce. The sound was primal, raw, a howl torn from the deepest part of her soul. The ancient stones responded. They lit up like stars, one by one, pulsing with golden silver light that spread in waves across the wastes. The dead trees began to glow from within, their bone-white wood illuminating with the same ethereal radiance. The very ground beneath Teresa trembled, cracks spreading outward in perfect geometric patterns that matched the constellations carved into the stone. Teresa's howl built higher, louder, becoming a roar of pure power that had been denied for too long. It echoed across the wastes, across the mountains, racing over valleys and through forests with the speed of thought itself. 10 miles away, it reached Ironpaw Village. The 40 survivors had been sorting through the ruins, trying to salvage what they could from the massacre. Dragan was helping pull bodies from collapsed buildings, his mind carefully not thinking about the black stone he'd thrown at Teresa's feet. Alpha Roderick was organizing burial details, his wounds bandaged, but still bleeding through. Elder Moira was in the temple, gathering supplies for the recovery efforts she'd planned. The howl hit them like a physical force. Every wolf in the village froze mid-motion. Warriors dropped the beams they'd been lifting. Children stopped crying. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Dragan's head snapped toward the wastes, his amber eyes going wide. He knew that voice. He'd heard it broken and pleading in the Great Hall just last night. But this wasn't broken. This was power given form. That voice. Alpha Roderick staggered, his hand going to his chest where his wolf was suddenly clawing to the surface, desperate and terrified and submissive. What is that? In the temple, Elder Moira's face drained of all color. The ceremonial knife she'd been holding clattered to the stone floor. No, it's too soon. She's not supposed to... The words choked off as the howl grew stronger, and Moira felt something she'd never felt in her 60 years. True fear. Every wolf within 50 miles felt it in their bones. It wasn't just sound, it was a command written into their DNA, an awakening of instincts older than language. It was a declaration that something ancient had returned to the world, and nothing would ever be the same. In the wastes, Teresa's body exploded with light. The transformation was violent and agonizing. Her bones didn't just crack, they shattered and reformed, growing, lengthening, reshaping into something that had no right to exist in the modern world. She screamed, but the sound was lost in the howl that continued to pour from her throat. Her spine arched backward at an impossible angle as she grew from 5 feet, 4 inches to 12 feet at the shoulder. Her skin erupted with fur, not the brown or gray of common wolves, but silver that shimmered like starlight caught in morning. Frost. The constellation birthmark on her shoulder blade, which Brenna had recognized and feared, began to spread. It crawled across her body like living art, the 7 stars multiplying into dozens, then hundreds, until her entire form was covered in glowing marks. Ancient symbols appeared in the fur, runic letters from languages dead for millennia, star patterns that mapped heavens no living wolf had seen, the phases of the moon circling her massive limbs, each marking blazed with its own light, turning her into something that seemed carved from moonlight and starfire. Her face elongated into a muzzle lined with fangs that gleamed like polished silver. Her eyes, those gray eyes that had held so much pain and so little hope, transformed into luminous gold that held the weight of 1,000 years of memory. When she blinked, the light didn't dim. It burned brighter, illuminating the wastes like twin suns. Her claws emerged last, pure silver that radiated light in pulses that matched. her hammering heart. They were weapons, yes, but also something more. Conduits for the ancient power that now flowed through her like blood. Teresa stood on 4 massive paws, and the ground cracked in a perfect circle around her. The air itself seemed to bend, reality adjusting to accommodate something that legend said had died out centuries ago. She was no longer just a wolf. She was a guardian, the ancient protectors from the first times when wolves and humans had fought side by side against the darkness that threatened to devour the world. The air shimmered, and they came. Ancient spirits materialized from nothing, massive translucent wolves formed of light and memory. There were 7 of them, 7 like the stars in Teresa's original birthmark, each one towering and terrible and beautiful. They approached Teresa's transformed form and as one, lowered themselves to the ground in submission. A voice spoke in her mind, gentle as a mother's touch, but powerful as an earthquake. "Welcome, last daughter of the first. Welcome, guardian reborn. We have waited so long for you." Memories that weren't hers flooded Teresa's consciousness like a dam breaking. She saw the first guardians 1,000 years ago, magnificent beings of light and power who stood between humanity and the void-born, shadow demons that fed on fear and despair. She saw the great battles, the sacrifices, the moment when guardian and human fought as one to seal away the darkness. She saw the betrayal. Power-hungry packs, jealous of the guardian's strength, hunted them to near extinction. They murdered guardian families in their sleep, burned their homes, erased their histories. They rewrote the legends, turning protectors into threats, heroes into villains. The guardian line dwindled, survivors forced into hiding, their power suppressed, generation after generation. Her family was the last, hidden, scattered, their very existence a secret passed down through careful whispers. And when someone discovered them, when they posed even the smallest threat to those who'd stolen power through genocide, they were eliminated. The weakness Teresa had suffered her entire life was her body's desperate attempt to transform, constantly fighting against the suppressants they'd forced down her throat. Every full moon sickness, every coughing fit, every moment of pain, all of it was her guardian nature, trying to emerge while Brenna's herbs tried to keep it buried. They'd tortured her for being what she was meant to be. The rage that had sparked the transformation intensified, burning through her like holy fire. Teresa threw back her massive head and howled again, and this time the sound carried fury and grief and terrible, beautiful purpose. The howl was still echoing across the mountains when she heard them coming. 40 wolves, armed and desperate, were entering the wastes. She could smell them, fear and determination and guilt all mixed together. She could hear Alpha, Roderick's voice carrying across the desolate landscape. "Find her body. Make sure she's dead. We can't let anyone know what we've done." Teresa turned toward the sound, her luminous eyes finding them, even though they were still a quarter mile away. The survivors entered a clearing and froze. They saw the massive silver-gold wolf, radiating light that hurt to look at directly. They saw the ancient spirits bowing in reverence to something that shouldn't exist. They saw the transformed landscape around her. What had been gray and dead was now alive with silver-gold light, the very earth responding to the guardian's presence. Dragon staggered, his legs suddenly weak. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. Stories she'd told him as a child, legends he'd dismissed as fantasy until this moment. Grandmother's stories. His voice cracked. They were true. She's a guardian. Teresa's eyes locked onto theirs. The 40 survivors felt it like a physical blow, overwhelming authority. That bypassed reason and struck directly at their wolves. Their legs gave out, every single one of them dropping to their knees involuntarily. It wasn't fear, though fear was there. It wasn't respect, though they felt that too. It was biological imperative, their wolves recognizing and submitting to a superior being the way the ocean recognized the moon. Teresa's voice emerged, amplified by ancient power until it seemed to come from the stones themselves. You wanted me gone. You wanted me silent. You wanted me weak. She began walking toward them, each footfall shaking the ground, cracks spreading with every step. Her massive form towered over them, 12 feet of divine fury and righteous anger. Now tell me. She stopped 10 feet away, her presence crushing them into the dirt. Who's weak? The survivors couldn't move, couldn't speak, pinned by power they'd spent generations trying to forget existed. Elder Moira tried to run. Of course she did. Teresa saw the elder woman scramble. Backward, terror finally cracking through her careful control. But vines of light erupted from the ground, wrapping around Moira's limbs, holding her in place like a fly in amber. Teresa's golden eyes fixed on the elder, and Moira whimpered, actually whimpered, under that gaze. "No one leaves," Teresa said, her voice resonating with the authority of 1,000 years, "until the truth is spoken." The silence that followed Teresa's declaration was absolute. Even the wind had stilled, as if nature itself was holding its breath to hear what came next. The 40 survivors remained pinned to the ground, their wolves howling internally with the need to submit. Elder Moira struggled against the vines of light that held her, but the more she fought, the tighter they became. Teresa's massive guardian form towered over them all, her silver gold fur rippling with power, her luminous eyes fixed on the elder with the intensity of divine judgment. The ancient spirits remained at the edges of the clearing, silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. Elder Moira. Teresa's voice resonated with layers of sound. Her own voice, yes, but also echoes of all the guardians who had come before her. Speak! It wasn't a request. It was a command that bypassed free will and struck directly at the soul. Moira's mouth opened against her will. She tried to clamp it shut, tried to bite her own tongue, tried to do anything to keep the words from spilling out. But the guardian's power was absolute. Her jaw worked, and words began pouring from her lips like poison from a lanced wound. "I made a deal with the Bloodfang Pack." The words came out in a rush, horror and fury warring on Moira's face as she betrayed herself. 3 months ago, I contacted their Alpha and offered him access to Iron Paw territory in exchange for his support when I claimed leadership. The survivors gasped, but none could move or speak. They were forced to listen, compelled to witness. I told them when to attack. I ensured the Eastern Gate would be unguarded. I made certain our warriors would be drunk and unprepared. Moira's voice cracked, tears of rage streaming down her weathered face. And I killed Brenna. Old Brenna threatened to tell the pack about the Omega Girl's true nature, so I poisoned her tea and watched her die choking on her own blood. Alpha Roderick made a sound like a wounded animal. His eyes were wide with disbelief and horror. You betrayed us? Killed our people? 200 wolves, children, elders, our families? Moira's mouth kept moving, words flowing like a confession ripped from her soul. Yes, all of it necessary. The guardian power is the key to ultimate dominance. With it, I could rule all packs. I've been suppressing the Omega's transformation for 12 years. Brenna taught me which herbs would keep the power dormant, keep her weak and manageable. Teresa's claws dug into the earth, creating furrows as rage built in her chest. You poisoned me. For 12 years, you poisoned me. Every full moon, the herbs kept your guardian nature buried, but the power was growing stronger. I knew it would eventually break free no matter what I did. Moira's face contorted with the effort of trying to stop speaking, but the words kept coming. So I orchestrated the raid. I needed you desperate, dying, pushed to your absolute limit. Only then would the transformation trigger. The wastes were supposed to isolate you, make it easier for me to capture you once you awakened. I planned to harvest your guardian power, bind it to myself. The clearing erupted in shocked murmurs from those who could manage speech around their compulsion to submission. You killed 200 wolves, Teresa said, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet. Just to force my transformation? Moira's laugh was bitter, broken. I didn't expect you to actually survive. The wastes, the wounds, the transformation itself. It should have killed you. You were supposed to die, and I was going to harvest what remained. Her eyes met Teresa's, and there was nothing but cold calculation there. You were always just a tool, a means to power. Teresa felt something crack inside her chest, not pain, but the final breaking of whatever small part of her had still hoped there was a reason, a justification, something that would make the suffering make sense. There was nothing. Just ambition and cruelty wrapped in elders' robes. She turned her burning gaze to Dragon. The war chief knelt 20 feet away, tears already streaming down his scarred face. He knew what was coming. And you! Teresa's voice was softer now, but no less powerful. Speak your truth, Dragon Stormfang. Dragon's shoulders shook. When he spoke, his voice was raw with grief and shame. I knew. My grandmother was Ilara Stormfang, the last keeper of the old histories. She was 78 when she died 5 years ago, and before she passed, she told me everything. He looked up at Teresa, meeting her eyes, despite the pain it caused him. She recognized your birthmark when you were 7 years old, the day of your first shift. The constellation pattern. She knew what it meant. She pulled me aside and said, "That child is guardian-born. She must be protected at all costs. The old power lives in her blood." Teresa's massive form went very still. You knew. When we were children. You knew what I was. Yes, Dragon's voice broke. For years, I did protect you. The food left outside your dwelling. The warnings about trouble. Scattering bullies who got too violent. I thought... He choked on a sob. I thought if I protected you quietly, I could keep you safe without drawing attention. But you stopped. Teresa's words cut like silver claws. When I became war chief at 22, Elder Moira called me to the temple. Dragon's fists clenched against his thighs. She told me she knew about my grandmother's stories. She said, "Protect the Omega, and you'll never rise higher. Your family will be exiled. Choose your loyalty, to a broken girl or to your bloodline's future." The shame on his face was a living thing, eating him from the inside. I chose ambition over honor. I stopped protecting you. I stood by while you suffered. I watched them beat you, poison you, treat you like garbage. And during your exile... His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I threw the stone to prove my loyalty to the pack, to show Moira I wasn't a threat to her plans. You loved me, Teresa said. It wasn't a question. Dragon's sob was wrenching. I loved you. I've loved you since we were children, since the first time I saw you trying so hard to be what they wanted you to be. You were kind in a pack that valued cruelty. You were gentle in a world of violence, and I loved you for it. He met her eyes again, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. But I was a coward. I chose power over you. I let them destroy you because it was easier than standing up for what was right. The clearing was silent except for Dragon's ragged breathing. I deserve death, he said quietly. He tilted his head back, exposing his throat in the ultimate gesture of submission. I offer my life as payment for my betrayal. I offer it gladly, Guardian. Please. Teresa stared at him. This man who had once been her secret protector and her ultimate betrayer. Part of her wanted to give him what he asked for. The rage inside her whispered that he deserved to suffer as she had suffered. But another part of her, the part that remembered a 19-year-old boy scattering bullies and telling her she was stronger than she knew, hesitated. She turned her attention to the other survivors. 37 wolves, not counting Moira, Dragon, and Roderick. She saw their faces. Fear, yes, but also guilt, shame, and in some cases genuine remorse. Young Petra, barely 19, with golden hair and terrified eyes, managed to speak around the compulsion. "Please, Guardian, some of us, we tried to help when we could. We just—" Her voice broke. "We were afraid." An old warrior named Grim, his gray beard braided with copper rings, nodded. "I gave you food sometimes, left it outside your dwelling. It wasn't much, I know, but I warned you once when Victor was planning something cruel," another voice added. Others nodded, admitting to small kindnesses that had seemed insignificant at the time, but had sometimes been the only light in Teresa's darkness. But there were others. Victor Blackmane, a brutal warrior with murder in his eyes, spat at the ground. "So what? You were weak. That's pack law. The strong dominate the weak. That's how it's always been." 5 other warriors stood with him. Not physically, they couldn't rise against the Guardian's pressure, but in spirit. Their faces showed no remorse, only anger that the natural order was being challenged. "We don't bow to freaks," one of them snarled. Teresa saw the divide clearly. Those who were cruel by nature, who genuinely believed might made right. Those who were cruel by cowardice, who stood by and let evil happen because speaking up was too dangerous. And those few who had tried, in their small ways, to show kindness despite the risk. The guardian spirits materialized more fully, their translucent forms solidifying until they looked almost real. Their voices whispered in her mind, "Punish them. They deserve destruction. Show them the price of cruelty." Part of Teresa agreed. They had left her to die. They had blamed her for their own doom. They deserved to suffer as she had suffered. The power flowing through her was intoxicating. She could destroy them all with a thought, could make them feel every moment of pain they'd inflicted, could ensure they never hurt anyone again. But another voice, quieter but no less insistent, her own voice, not the guardian power, whispered a different truth. "Is this who you want to be?" She thought of the guardian purpose, shown to her in the flood of ancient memories. Guardians protected. They didn't dominate. They stood between the darkness and the light. But she also thought, justice isn't just mercy, it's consequences. Some of these wolves deserved forgiveness. Some deserved a second chance. But some deserved exactly what they'd tried to give her: exile, isolation, the slow understanding of what they'd become. Teresa made her decision. The light around her intensified, and then she began to shift. Her massive guardian form compressed, bones reshaping, fur receding. Within seconds, she stood before them in human form, naked, yes, but uncaring. Power radiated from her skin like heat from a forge. The constellation markings remained, glowing softly across her body, a permanent reminder of what she'd become. When she spoke, her voice still carried echoes of ancient authority. "Elder Moira, for genocide, betrayal, and the murder of old Brenna, I sentence you to the wastes, alone, as you intended for me." Moira's scream was pure terror. The light vines lifted her from the ground, dragging her toward the deeper wastes where even the dead stones gave way to absolute desolation. The guardian spirits followed, their forms flickering between solid and ethereal. "You will wander until the land claims you," Teresa continued, her voice following Moira into the darkness. "Your death will be slow. And when you finally fall, you will understand every moment of suffering you caused." Moira's screams faded into the distance. Teresa turned to Victor and the 5 warriors who stood with him. "You reveled in causing pain. You chose cruelty when you could have chosen indifference. You believe strength gives you the right to destroy the weak." She raised her hand, and silver light blazed from her palm. It struck each of the 6 warriors in turn, burning a symbol onto their foreheads, a broken fang, the mark of exile. You are severed from the pack, exiled beyond the borders. If you return, death awaits. The guardian spirits moved forward, and the 6 warriors scrambled to their feet, fleeing in terror as translucent wolves drove them toward the horizon. Their screams joined Moira's, fading into nothing. Alpha Roderick remained on his knees, his head bowed. Teresa approached him, and he flinched but didn't run. "You failed your pack through arrogance," she said quietly. "You put pride before wisdom. You chose to believe your own superiority rather than listen to the truth." Roderick's voice was broken. "I accept responsibility for my failures. You are no longer Alpha. You will serve the pack you nearly destroyed. You will rebuild what your arrogance burned down." Teresa's eyes held his. "Can you do that, Roderick Ironclaw? Can you serve instead of rule?" Roderick bowed his head lower. "I accept." Teresa moved to Dragon last. He still knelt with his throat exposed, tears drying on his face. She stood before him, close enough to touch, and for a long moment said nothing. "You knew the truth and said nothing," she finally said. "You chose ambition over honor. You watched me suffer and did nothing to stop it." "Yes." Dragon's voice was steady despite the tears. "I deserve death, Teresa. Please." She paused, and their eyes met. Gray to amber, guardian to betrayer, the girl who loved him once to the man who abandoned her. "You will live," Teresa said, and Dragon's eyes widened in shock. "But you will serve as guardian sworn, bound to protect the weak you once ignored. You will spend every day remembering what your cowardice cost. Every life you save will be a step toward redemption you'll never fully reach." "Yes, Guardian." Dragon's voice broke. "I accept my punishment." Teresa turned to the remaining survivors, 31 wolves who had been neither heroes nor villains, just people who chose safety over courage. "You were afraid. Fear is not evil, but silence in the face of evil is complicity." Her voice softened slightly. "You will rebuild. You will create a pack where strength means protection, not domination, where the weak are defended, not destroyed." She let her words settle before delivering the final truth. "I am not your Alpha. I am your guardian, and I will be watching." The compulsion released. The survivors gasped as control of their bodies returned. Some collapsed fully to the ground, sobbing. Others remained kneeling, processing what had just happened. The pack they'd known was dead. Something new was being born in its place. The sky darkened. Not gradually, but suddenly, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the sun. The temperature plummeted, frost spreading across the ground despite it being early autumn. A wind blew from the north, carrying a smell like rot and ashes and old death. One of the guardian spirits materialized fully, its translucent form solidifying until it looked almost alive. Its voice echoed in Teresa's mind and somehow in the minds of all the survivors. "Guardian, they come." Teresa's head snapped toward the north. "Who comes?" "The Voidborn. Your awakening has broken the seal. They return to finish what they started 1,000 years ago." In the distance, the sky itself began to tear. Rifts appeared like wounds in reality, darkness bleeding through. From those wounds, shapes emerged, shadow creatures with forms that hurt to look at directly, beings that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. The Voidborn, the ancient enemy the Guardians had died fighting, the reason the Guardian bloodline had been created in the first place. They were coming, an army of nightmares drawn by the Guardian's awakening like moths to flame. Teresa felt her heart hammering, felt the weight of what was about to happen. She transformed back into her guardian form, silver gold fur blazing with light. She looked at the survivors, these wolves who had betrayed her, exiled her, left her to die. "Then we fight," she said, her voice carrying across the clearing. She turned to face them fully, this pack that was no longer hers, but was still her responsibility to protect. "Those who cast me out, will you fight beside me or die alone?" The survivors looked at each other, looked at the approaching darkness, looked at Teresa, this impossible being they'd tried to destroy. Dragon was first. He stood, shifted into his russet wolf form, and moved to stand beside Teresa. "I fight with you." Grim followed, then Petra, then Roderick. One by one, the survivors rose and shifted, forming a line between the wastes and the approaching darkness. They would fight, not because they deserved redemption, but because the alternative was extinction. The Voidborn descended like a plague of shadows, and the Guardians' first true battle began. The Voidborn came like a plague of nightmares given form. They poured through the tears in reality. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, shapes that twisted the eye and made the mind recoil. They had no fixed form, constantly shifting between states of matter as if they couldn't decide whether to be solid, liquid, or something else entirely. Some looked like wolves made of smoke and screaming. Others resembled nothing from the natural world, just writhing masses of darkness, with too many limbs and mouths that opened in places mouths shouldn't be. Where they touched the ground, grass withered and died. Where their shadows fell, color drained from the world. They devoured light and life, leaving only the cold gray of absolute absence. The survivors who had formed a line beside Teresa took one look at the approaching horde, and their courage faltered. "We can't fight shadows!" someone shouted, terror cracking their voice. "How do you kill something that has no body?" Another cried. Panic rippled through the makeshift battle line. Wolves who had faced down enemy packs, who had survived the Bloodfang raid, who had lived through violence and death, found themselves frozen by primal fear of something that defied all natural law. Teresa felt it too, the instinctive horror of facing an enemy that shouldn't exist. But she also felt something else, the ancient knowledge flooding through her guardian blood. Memories of battles fought 1,000 years ago when her ancestors had stood against this same darkness. "You can fight them!" Teresa's voice boomed across the clearing, amplified by her guardian power. "I'll show you how." She didn't wait for them to believe her. She charged forward, her massive silver-gold form blazing like a comet. The Voidborn swarmed toward her, and for a moment it looked like she'd be swallowed by the darkness. Her claws cut through shadow. Where her light touched, the Voidborn became solid. Just for an instant. But an instant was enough. Her silver claws found purchase, tearing through what had been intangible, revealing the cores hidden within the shifting darkness. The creature she'd struck shrieked and dissolved, its essence scattering like ash on the wind. "Strike where my light touches," Teresa roared. "Aim for the cores! They can be killed! You just have to see them first!" She created a pulse of radiance that washed over the battlefield, and suddenly the Voidborn were visible, not as shapeless shadows, but as creatures with structure, with weak points, with cores that glowed faintly within the darkness. The survivors hesitated for one more heartbeat. Then Dragon shifted fully into his russet wolf form and charged forward with a howl. "For the Guardian! For the pack!" His claws, guided by Teresa's light, found a Voidborn's core and tore it apart. That was all it took. The others followed. Roderick's massive gray form, young Petra's smaller golden shape, old Grim with his scarred hide. 32 wolves surged forward into battle, fighting not for dominance or territory, but for survival itself. The battle was chaos and desperation. The Voidborn were endless, pouring through the portals faster than they could be cut down. For every shadow creature that fell, 2 more took its place. The survivors fought with everything they had, but Teresa could see them flagging, see the terror building as they realized they were being overwhelmed. She had to change their approach, had to teach them in the middle of battle what it meant to fight as guardians fought. Teresa positioned herself at the center of the weakest fighters: young Petra, an injured warrior named Cole, two others who were already wounded and struggling. She didn't strike out at the Voidborn that came for them. She shielded. Her massive form became a wall of light, her claws intercepting attacks meant for those behind her. A Voidborn's tendril lashed out at Petra. Teresa's claws severed it. Another creature lunged for Cole's exposed flank. Teresa's jaws closed around its core, crushing it. "Shield the one beside you!" Teresa's voice carried across the battlefield. "Strength means nothing if you fight alone. Protect each other." The survivors heard her. More importantly, they listened. Dragon, who had been fighting on the front lines with reckless fury, suddenly shifted position to protect Roderick's blind side. The old Alpha, who had ruled through dominance and fear, found himself fighting back-to-back with young Petra, defending her while she defended him. Grim pulled a wounded wolf behind him, taking blows meant for someone weaker. The old dynamics, strong versus weak, dominant versus submissive, broke down in the face of necessity. They were learning to fight as a unit, as a true pack, protecting rather than dominating. Teresa's howl cut through the battle, rallying them, filling them with courage that came not from her power, but from the choice they were making to stand together. Her light expanded outward, creating a dome of radiance that the Voidborn couldn't fully penetrate. Within that dome, the survivors could breathe, could regroup, could remember they were fighting for something worth saving. But the Voidborn kept coming. The portals pulsed with darkness, disgorging more creatures. They were being pushed back, step by step, toward the waste's edge. Then the temperature dropped even further. Frost spread across the ground in intricate patterns that looked almost like writing. The Voidborn pulled back, creating a circle around the survivors, and something emerged from the largest portal. It was massive, 3 times Teresa's guardian size, a towering form that seemed to be made of concentrated darkness. Where the other Voidborn were shapeless, this one had definition, a wolf-like frame, but wrong, with too many joints and angles that hurt to look at directly. Its eyes were voids within voids, absolute absence given awareness. When it moved, reality seemed to bend around it. The ancient spirits materialized fully, their translucent forms solid with alarm. Their voices echoed in Teresa's mind. Maltharos, the devourer, the one who destroyed the first guardians. The creature spoke, and its voice was like mountains grinding against each other, like the death rattle of stars. "Last guardian, you cannot win. Your ancestors fell before me. You are alone." Teresa's massive form stood straighter. She looked at the survivors around her. These wolves who had rejected her, cast her out, left her to die. They were terrified, wounded, barely holding together, but they were here. They were fighting. "I'm not alone," Teresa said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "Not anymore." She gestured at the survivors with one massive paw. "These wolves rejected me, cast me out, left me to die in the wastes. They blamed me for their own failures. They called me weak, broken, cursed." Maltharos laughed, a sound like reality cracking. "Then why protect them? Why not let them fall as they deserve?" "Because they're fighting now." Teresa's golden eyes blazed. "They're learning. They're choosing to be better than what they were. They're protecting the weak instead of destroying them. They're standing together instead of alone." She took a step toward the massive Voidborn, her light intensifying. "That's something you'll never understand, creature of darkness. The strength that comes from choosing to protect instead of dominate. The power of becoming more than what you were." Maltharos's laugh was contemptuous. "Sentiment, weakness, it will be your undoing." "No." Teresa's voice dropped to a deadly quiet. "It's strength you've never known." Maltharos charged, and the world exploded into violence. The devourer was fast despite its size, its form blurring between solid and shadow. It struck at Teresa with limbs that seemed to come from impossible angles. She met each attack with claws and fangs, her light burning against its darkness. They clashed in the center of the battlefield, titans fighting while the smaller Voidborn and the survivors battled around them. Teresa realized quickly that she couldn't win alone. Maltheros was ancient, powerful, had destroyed guardians far more experienced than her. Every blow she landed seemed to barely affect it, while each strike it made threatened to overwhelm her. She needed help, but not the kind the guardians of old had relied on. Individual power, singular strength. She needed something different. She needed them to choose. "Dragon!" Teresa's voice cut through the chaos. "Roderick, Petra, Grimm, everyone, listen to me!" The survivors turned toward her, still fighting, still holding back the smaller Voidborn. "Give me your oath," Teresa commanded. "Swear to protect the weak. Swear to serve with honor. Swear to stand as guardians, not just as wolves." For a moment, silence. Maltheros laughed. The survivors looked at each other, uncertain. Then Dragon stepped forward, his russet form battered but unbowed. "I swear," his voice rang out clear and strong, "I swear to protect the weak I once ignored. I swear to serve with honor I once abandoned. I swear to stand as guardian." Light flowed from Teresa into Dragon like liquid silver. His form shuddered and silver streaks appeared in his russet fur. His eyes took on a faint golden glow. He grew slightly larger, faster, stronger. Not a full guardian, but guardian touched. Roderick was next. I swear to serve instead of rule, to protect instead of dominate." Light flowed into him, transforming him. Then Petra, then Grimm. One by one, the survivors stepped forward and gave their oaths. Each time, light flowed from Teresa into them, binding them together, not through dominance but through shared purpose. They transformed, not into guardians but into something new. Guardians sworn, wolves touched by ancient power, united by choice. As the last oath was given, Teresa felt it, a surge of power that came not from herself alone, but from all of them together. The strength of unity, of shared purpose, of wolves who had chosen to be better than they were. "Together!" Teresa roared. They charged as one, 33 wolves, 1 guardian, and 32, guardian touched, striking at Maltheros with coordinated precision. They fought as a unit, each one covering another's weaknesses, each strike building on the one before. Dragon created an opening. Roderick struck through it. Petra's speed allowed her to distract. Grimm's strength allowed him to damage. And Teresa, at the center of it all, channeled their combined power into a single, devastating strike. Her silver claws, blazing with the light of 33 souls who had chosen honor, pierced Maltheros' core. The devourer screamed. "This isn't over, we will return. The seal weakens. You cannot hold us forever." Its form dissolved, imploding into a point of absolute darkness before vanishing completely. The other Voidborn shrieked and fled, scrambling back through the portals. The portals themselves collapsed, sealing with sounds like reality healing itself, then silence. The survivors stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, covered in wounds and exhaustion. Dawn was breaking over the wastes, the first light of morning washing away the unnatural darkness. They'd won. Impossibly, against all odds, they'd survived. Teresa transformed back into human form, the constellation markings still glowing softly on her skin. She staggered, exhausted, and several wolves moved to support her. She was spent, pushed beyond her limits, but alive. They were all alive. Roderick approached slowly, his eyes full of something that might have been awe or gratitude or shame, probably all three. "You saved us. After everything we did to you." "I didn't save you for you," Teresa said quietly but firmly. "I saved you because it's what guardians do, because protecting life is the purpose I was born for." She looked at each of them in turn. "But know this, the pack you were is dead. You can't go back to what you were. You'll build something new, or you'll build nothing at all." She stood straighter, despite her exhaustion. "This is the Guardian Covenant, and you will follow it. Strength protects. It does not dominate. The pack serves the weak, not enslaves them. Worth is measured by character, not by power, and any who harm the helpless will answer to the Guardian." Dragon dropped to his knees before her. "I am yours to command, Guardian. Use me as you will." Teresa looked down at him, this man who had loved her and betrayed her and fought beside her. "I don't want servants, Dragon. I want allies who choose honor because it's right, not because they're commanded." She paused. "Can you be that? Can you choose honor every day knowing you'll never fully redeem what you've lost?" Dragon met her eyes, and she saw genuine determination there. "I will spend my life proving I can." Teresa nodded. "Then rise. We have much work to do." 3 months passed like water flowing downstream, steady, inevitable, transforming the landscape as it went. Ironpaw Village was being rebuilt, but it looked different now. The strict divisions between Omega and Warrior, between weak and strong, had been dismantled. Wolves took roles based on skill and choice, not birth. Young Petra was training as a healer. Old Grim was teaching combat to anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of their strength. Former warriors were learning crafts they'd once considered beneath them. Teresa trained them in the Guardian ways, not just how to fight, but how to protect, how to use strength in service rather than dominance, how to see value in every member of the pack, not just the powerful ones. Dragon worked tirelessly, earning back trust piece by piece through action rather than words. He and Teresa had a relationship that defied easy definition. Not lovers, not quite friends, but something forged in fire and betrayal and redemption. They worked well together, but there was a distance there that might never fully close. Some wounds heal, but the scars remain. Word of the Guardian's return spread across the Northern Highlands like wildfire. Other packs began to take notice. 3 packs sent envoys requesting to join the Guardian Covenant, wanting to learn the new ways. But others, the old traditional packs built on dominance and cruelty, rejected the changes. They called Teresa a threat, a disruption to the natural order. Teresa welcomed their resistance. She stood on the cliff overlooking the valley, wearing simple leather clothes that left her constellation-marked arms bare. The marks glowed faintly in the evening light, a constant reminder of what she'd become. Below, she could see the rebuilt village, smoke rising from cook fires, wolves going about their lives without fear of random violence. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. She knew his scent. 3 more packs have requested to join the Covenant, Dragon said, coming to stand beside her. The River Song Pack, the Shadow Pine Pack, and the Meadow Run Pack. They're sending delegations next week. "And the others?" Teresa asked. Dragon's expression darkened. "The Ironjaw Pack, the Bloodstone Alliance, and 5 others are resistant. They're calling you a threat to pack traditions. Some are even talking about forming a coalition." Teresa smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. "Good. Let them fear what they can't control." She turned to look at Dragon. The Guardians didn't fall because they were weak. They fell because they were too merciful. They believed that if they protected everyone, even those who hated them, eventually everyone would see the value in peace. Her eyes glowed faintly gold. "I won't make that mistake." "Teresa," Dragon's voice held warning. "I'm not just a protector, Dragon. I'm a reckoning." She looked back at the valley. This world rejected the weak for too long, turned vulnerability into a death sentence, made cruelty into a virtue. Now the weak have teeth, and the cruel will learn consequences. She transformed partially, just her hands, which became powerful claws tipped with silver. Her eyes blazed full gold. Let the old packs resist. I welcome it. They'll learn the same lesson you did. You can't defeat what you created. They made me in their cruelty, and now they'll face what they've wrought. Teresa threw back her head and howled. The sound rolled across the valley, and from the village below, her guardian-touched wolves howled in response. Dragon joined them, his voice harmonizing with hers. The sound was beautiful and terrible all at once, promise and warning, protection and threat. The age of cruelty is ending, Teresa said softly as the howls faded, whether they like it or not. Teresa Allen had been rejected for weakness. Now she was the most powerful force in the realm, and she would never, ever be silenced again.
You know, Teresa's story reminds me that sometimes the greatest power comes from surviving what should have destroyed us. If this hit home for you, I'd genuinely love to know where you're experiencing this from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And if Teresa's transformation resonated with you, help others find this story by hitting that like button and sharing it with someone who needs to hear about rising from the ashes. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And don't forget that notification bell so you catch the next one. Thanks for being here.